Greetings, adventurers. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, and welcome back to DanMachi Season 3 Cut Content and Review for Episode 4. And before we get straight into the episode, I do want to say one quick little thing. I have heard some of the feedback on, the past two episodes, I've been a bit negative on the anime, and I do want to apologize if it seems that way, because I do have some criticisms for the anime itself, because I am a light novel reader, and knowing the source, I know the potential this material has, so it will, of course, disappoint me when I feel like it's not reaching that potential. But I do understand, content has to be skipped through because of the pacing required to fit this into 12 episodes. I've said my grievances about that. But if you just want the cut content in DanMachi Season 3, and not my actual opinion on how the episodes are being adapted, then I am making those cuts and changes videos in the style of my Season 2 ones, where I go over all the cuts and changes made in the anime from each individual light novel. With Episode 4, we just finished adapting Volume 9 of the light novel, so it is in the current plan to hopefully get that cuts and changes video out for Volume 9, hopefully before Episode 5 comes out, but I don't want to make too many promises because it is a large undertaking to make that style of video, and I do have other projects I'm trying to do during that week as well, because episode Freya comes out that Tuesday, and I'm trying to make sure I finish reading it and get out a review on that day, so bear with me. But anyway, let's get into episode 4. Now, episode 4 of the anime adapts the very end of volume 9, the last 37 pages, and it also adapts about 22 pages worth of volume 10, so we are getting into volume 10 with this episode. So hopefully that puts us on a good pace to give a good adaptation to volume 10 and volume 11, especially with how the pacing is going for the anime. Now, they do skip about 15 pages that happen in volume 10 that's towards the middle, so they can end the episode on a cliffhanger that you see with the trap for the Xenos that Nicholas Familia makes, but I do imagine they will adapt what's in those 15 pages in the next episode, because it's hard for me to think of how they will do the anime without those scenes. But the episode starts out with this interesting contrast showcasing the Xenos in this violent imagery, what are they doing? And they look so scary, and they're just preparing a meal and getting the food and the drink. So it was a fun contrast, this is how you would normally perceive monsters, but in reality, they're just having fun. Now, I don't think I addressed this last week, but I do really enjoy the anime's portrayal of Leto. I think his voice actor does a tremendous job with him, and they just do a really good job just showcasing his character, showing how fun he can be. And something I'm glad they included in this episode is that green dragon behind Wine, because that's one of the small little details that was skipped last episode, where when all the Xenos popped out, there was a green dragon in the background the entire time. He's this huge thing, and they never noticed that he was there. And I'm glad to see that he is indeed behind Wine in this scene. Now, one thing they address in the light novel during this conversation between Leto and Belle is that Belle discovers that the gazes he's been feeling on him, at least some of them, are due to the Xenos that were watching him and Hestia Familia traverse through the dungeon to get to this point, because they wanted to see how they reacted with Wine, if they were willing to protect her. And that's just some of the things that the anime has been skipping, because I think I mentioned last episode where when Hestia Familia was going down into the dungeon, on the surface, Nicholas Familia was watching them, and Belle could feel the sensation of being watched because of that. And he gets that sense of being watched because Freya watches him all the time, so now he has this weird sixth sense where he can sense when people are watching him. So, and again, you see here in the episode that Nicholas Familia was trying to track Hestia Familia and follow them to hopefully end up and find the Xenos lair. But of course, Hermes Familia was tailing them, and that makes Nicholas Familia immediately retreat and then escape. And that's when you have that scene between Hermes and Osby, with her saying that they failed in being able to track down Nicholas Familia and where their hideout is in the dungeon. And they also changed the location of this conversation, because originally it took place inside the Hermes Familia home, but here they just have this conversation outside the city walls. Now, one thing I thought was strange was how they changed the context on how Leto acquired those weapons of his, because in the light novel, Leto explains that it wasn't that he killed an adventurer like the anime seems to imply, but he fought back against an adventurer who attacked him, and that adventurer got scared of how skillful Leto was and just dropped his weapons and ran. And then Leto basically just took ownership of those weapons because, like, he told Bell, well, adventurers like to hold on to like these monster fangs and claws, so I don't see why we can't hold on to these adventurer weapons. So again, I thought it was odd that they kind of changed the context of how Leto got those weapons. I guess it's just to draw even like stricter contrasts and a parallel between the fact that adventurers kill monsters for material, so the Zenos kill adventurers to get their shiny weapons. And Leto also praises like the craftsmanship of the weapons, because in the dungeon there are these things called nature weapons which grow from the dungeon. For example, the lizardmen that Bell and Well fought last episode, they're supposed to use these nature weapons that come from these like flowers that grow in the dungeon, and the petals are kind of like steel, so they use those weapons as nature weapons. But Leto is a big fan of the craftsmanship of actual weapons from adventurers. And similar to Leto, I do enjoy their portrayal of Gross. You can really tell that he doesn't really think much of adventurers, he's opposed to like allying with them. And you can see Gross has his own little faction within the Zenos, about 1/3 of it that's opposed to being friendly with adventurers like Bell and Hestia Familia. They're still very distrusting of them, and you see that with Ranye as well towards the end of the episode. But man, guys, I really wish they could have given Gross like some more animations, because I couldn't help but notice, but throughout this episode you can kind of tell that they were recycling some of the framing that was used in the episode, recycling some of like the animations, because you see like that scene with Mikoto and Haruhime with the Zenos, they're kind of just like recycling some of the animations. I get some of that was used for comedic effect, but it still happened throughout the episode, so I'm guessing they're trying to save some of their budget for the later episodes in the season, because the last half of this season, if done properly, will be very epic. So I assume that's where most of the effort towards animation is going to be, but it's still really awkward seeing like some of the very obvious shortcuts they're using in this episode, like especially even with Oranos and Hestia's conversation. There's lots of panning involved, a lot of the same type of shots as well. Sometimes you wish those scenes of exposition where they're just talking about the story and the circumstances were just a bit more visually interesting. And I say visually interesting, and that's actually what they kind of tried to do when they had Oranos say some of that exposition over this montage of Rei singing and then the Zenos dancing. But that's actually a scene I wish they just animated separately from the exposition, because this was something I was looking forward to in the light novel. Because reading it, I was excited to see the scene, because it's described that Rei has a very beautiful voice, and it actually just stuns everyone Hestia Familia because it is so beautiful. And then all the Zenos are like slightly drunk from the drinking and all trying to dance. The harpy Fia pulls Mikoto in to start dancing. You see that in one of those still montage shots. And even Wine drags Haruhime to dance with her, but you don't really see that in the anime. Not even one of those still shots you see Wine dancing with Haruhime. That doesn't happen, unfortunately. And I just really wish we got to see that little portion animated. I get that we're like trying to fit all of this into 12 episodes, but man, it's just something I really wish to see. And it's even stranger to me because last episode, in episode 3, the thing that Wine hears is Rei's singing, and that's what guides him to that quartz crystal that is hiding the entrance to the Zenos village. So I found it strange that they still included that, with Rei singing guiding them to the village, but didn't actually showcase Rei's singing here in the episode. We don't actually get to hear it. And then the scenes with Icarus Familia, they kind of combine two scenes together as one. It's one from the ending of Volume 9 and one from the very beginning of Volume 10. Basically, one of the hunters is upset with one of the Zenos they have captured. They're trying to get information, probably where the Zenos lair is, and then they're talking about how Hermes Familia foiled their plans in tailing Hestia Familia to that lair, but now you know they're being resilient because they're currently in the stages of setting up a trap. That book that Dix is holding is very important. and it's described at the beginning of Volume 10, which was one of the things that was skipped to get to the cliffhanger with them doing the trap. But I think they'll address the notebook at a later time, because it's going to be really hard to explain some of the circumstances later on in the season if they don't explain a bit about that notebook. So I won't say too much on it right now in case they do adapt that later in the season, but I will address it if for some reason they don't ever do that themselves. The one hint I will give is that the notebook is related to Dix's ancestry, and we discovered that one of the gods that Ornos has shared the existence of Xenos with is Ganesha, the guy that's always, I am Ganesha, the guy that's played as like this comedic character, but he is the god of the masses. Ganesha Familia is the biggest Familia in Arario. They act as this police force. They try to protect everyone in the city. So it is appropriate that Ganesha is the one, or one of the few people that know about the Xenos. This is why Ornos and Ganesha made Monsterphilia, so the people of the city could get more used to seeing monsters in this brighter light, because Monsterphilia is like this big festival about the tamed monsters and entertainment. So that was one of the steps Ornos was trying to take, so the citizens of Arario may eventually be ready to accept the Xenos. And one thing that really impressed me is that they actually kept a lot of Fels' backstory in this episode. I thought they would basically not mention it, but I'm really happy they did. Like, he's this mage from hundreds of years ago that originally made a philosopher's stone that could make the elixir of eternal life. What they didn't mention was that he presented this stone to his god, and then his god was disappointed and basically destroyed the stone as a warning to not seek immortal life. And you can see where Fel's pursuit of eternal life got him. And again, Fels has no confirmed gender, but I just refer to Fels as him sometimes because it's just easier to do. And also Fels has the Enigma skill, which is very similar to what Osfi has, where they can both make special items. Like you see, Fels is able to make those oculi and those orbs that can help the Xenos and Fels communicate with each other. And Osfi, of course, can make the Hades helm, which lets her become invisible. And I really liked how they showcased Alito being frustrated that he was no longer the strongest among the Xenos, because he mentions a very new Xenos who was born recently that went down into the deeper levels to go and train. So like, man, he's stronger than me, and now he's still training. And also in the light novel, Bell notes internally that when he was fighting Leto, he was likely holding back, and was stronger than Pern, or Toad, you know, that captain of Ishtar Familia. He assumes that Leto is stronger than her, a level 5 adventurer, so that means whoever this new Xenos is stronger than level 5 for sure. And of course we have Leto adding Ichi to everyone's name, calling Lily Lily-Chi. And then we get onto the topic of Leto's dreams. So Leto describes one of his dreams being of this sunset in the sky, but of course, Leto's never been to the surface, so how can he have these dreams? So we get into the concept of monsters actually being reborn with some of their memories intact, and that's how some of the Xenos come to be. Now, some people might be a bit confused and might think that this is a way to showcase that the Xenos might have been people at some point, but that's not necessarily the case. Remember, in ancient times, monsters used to be all over the world, and that's when the dungeon was still this big hole in the world before it got closed and became the dungeon. So the monsters that are out in the world right now are descendants of the monsters that used to be all over, but they are much weaker than their dungeon counterparts. So it's assumed that Leto, one of his past lives, is of a monster who was actually outside of Arario. And we're presented with that contrast between the human races who die and their souls go back to heaven, and then the gods judge those souls, and then some of those souls are reborn as people. And then conversely, monsters, or at least Ornos hypothesizes that monsters have souls and die, and those souls go back to the dungeon, and monsters are reborn from the dungeon. And during the scene when the Xenos are starting to leave, in the light novel, Bell is like thinking to himself, like, seeing what I'm seeing right now, seeing these Xenos in this village, seeing how they're acting like people, can I really point my blade at a monster and attack them? And I really wish they had Bell at least have like a one-sentence monologue of something to that regard, because the anime has this scene where Leto like just randomly shows Bell like, here, look, it's a magic stone. I'm now eating the magic stone. We kill monsters too to survive. We need to protect ourselves, so I don't want you to hesitate when confronted with a monster because I want you to survive. You need to live. Don't hesitate. Protect yourself, because hesitating means death. And I think that scene is a tiny bit awkward because before, the anime doesn't really portray really well Belle's internal struggle regarding fighting monsters, because as I addressed in episode 2, I thought the framing of Belle's encounter and its hesitation was a bit weird because he kind of just steps in front of Lily to protect her and doesn't do anything, just kind of stands there. I really wish, like, to showcase that struggle, like similar to the light novel, they would show him actually trying to attack and then stopping when he thinks about Wine, but they don't really showcase that, so I thought Leto giving him this talk here was kind of slightly awkward. And in the light novel, Leto actually straight up tells Belle, if there's a monster who speaks but still attacks you, do not hesitate to kill them. Kill them for me. And I do think it was quite humorous when Wine was like hitting Leto as she's like trying to stay with Belle and everyone, and Leto just kind of picks her up. Now, I do like the music they play during this parting between Wine and Belle, but I don't really think it's directed too well, and it's especially awkward because at the very end of this parting scene, we have Wine and Leto and Ray like leaving, and they're kind of just like slowly teleporting away, and I get that it's supposed to, like, I guess showcase the distance in a short amount of time without taking the time to like animate them walking that. But I think a better way to do this, and especially I think this would make the outburst of Belle less awkward, where you just out of nowhere it cuts to him just yelling, "We will meet again," because if they did not want to like animate the Xenos leaving, like walking and doing like that weird time-lapse thing where they're just like fading away and teleporting away from the screen, it would have been better if they just like kind of like had the camera on Belle that entire time and then just showcase Wine screaming for Belle, but it getting farther and farther away. And then while Belle is being shown in the camera, you can show him like how he is in the light novel where he's hearing this. He like wants to say something but is not sure, doesn't have the resolve to do anything as Wine is being taken away from him. It's said that he's like clenching his fist, and then he finally gets that resolve to like shout that out, that outburst that we will meet again. So I just think the way it was directed in the anime adaptation was a bit odd from how I thought it should have been. And then one really minor nitpick I have, which might seem a bit crazy on my part, but when Belle comes out of the dungeon and then talks to Hestia, he asks her, "What is the dungeon?" And I thought the delivery on that line was a bit weird, like it seemed like more of a casual question, but in my head when reading the novel, it was more like a line I thought would have been read with like more desperation, more sadness. It did not come off that way in the anime. I thought it would have been more like, "What is the dungeon?" or something like that. So I'm not really blaming Matsuoka, who is Belle's voice actor, because he's my favorite voice actor, and I know he can do great acting. Like, he's Betelgeuse in Re:Zero. He does Kirito for SAO, and I think a lot of people agree that he did a great job with a particular emotional scene at the second part of War of Underworld. So Matsuoka can definitely act. I just think maybe just the voice direction was off, because I say that a lot of times with this season. Like, I feel like some of the direction's kind of off. But maybe I'm just being a bit crazy about this scene. Maybe I'm insane. And that scene pretty much finishes the adaptation of Volume 9, then we start going into 10. And as we get into this Volume 10 content, they kind of skip like a 15-page section in the middle, so they can end the episode on this cliffhanger with the trap that the Hunters and Dix set on the Xenos. But here we have Wine being escorted by a few other Xenos as they travel to a different village. They're all broken up into separate groups, smaller groups, because if a group of like 40 plus Xenos were just walking around all together in the dungeon, it might look a bit suspicious, so they need to be split into smaller sections. So this is the section that Wine is with. They have the Arachne, the spider lady, whose name is Ranye, and she's part of the Gross faction, where they're distrustful of humans. You see her kind of badmouth them, and that makes Wine cry, and then and this is so weird to me, because I'll describe the other members of the Xenos party. But Foe, the Formor, he's described as this gentle Xenos, and it's so weird, because we have Wine crying, and in the light novel, she's like trying to wipe away her tears, and there's still some tears on her cheek. So Foe, like, takes it says in the novel, he takes his one finger, his one giant finger, and gently wipes away the tears. But in the anime, it's so strange to me. They just like, it almost makes it look like he's like manhandling Rine's face. I'm like, what are you doing? I question, like, if you're an anime only, how did you perceive this scene? Like, faux manhandling Rine's face. It was so confusing to me. Like I knew what they were doing because I know what that scene is supposed to portray in the novel. Like, you see the tears disappear after Fo's finishing manhandling Rine's face. But to me, that comes off as very strange to an anime-only viewer. I don't know why they didn't just keep it the way it was, unless they were trying to like play up comedy for some reason. But as far as the other members of this small group, we have Ordo, who is a war shadow. He's just dressed up in this complete body armor, and he's actually supposed to be like the lead person of this group because at like far away he's just in that armor, so he looks like a regular adventurer if you don't get too close and notice that it's a war shadow inside the armor. And it's described that he's very supportive of the group. He's always the first person to take on a threat, and you see that later on in the episode. And then we have Cliff the Griffin, who doesn't fly for some reason, even though in the light novel it's described that he prefers to be airborne and is flying. I imagine it's just harder to animate him flying, so they just have him walk. We have Fia the Harpy, and she was the harpy that was pulling Mikoto to go ahead and dance when Rei was singing. So the group is traversing through the dungeon, and I thought the framing of it was really strange because you have like this big wide angle shot of them being far away, but you see them like gradually making progress. But as they're like conversing, and then Ranye is like kind of telling Rine not to be trusting of humans. While they're having this conversation, I thought the framing was just so weird because they're like walking through the dungeon, and you have Ranye and Ordo like just waiting for them to walk to them, and that just continues. Like, why are they just not walking together? So I just thought that was a bit strange. And I do like this anime original edition of Rine saying that she liked Mikoto's cooking, because that's not mentioned in the novel. But there's like this pessimistic side to me that's like, oh, they inserted this line because they couldn't put in the original line, which was Rine saying that Hestia Familia gave her a lot of hugs. But as I like to remind JC staff, they didn't show Bell hugging Rine at the end of episode 2 like he was supposed to. They didn't show Bell hugging Rine during episode 3 like he was supposed to. So they can't have Rine saying that Hestia Familia hugs her because they didn't animate Bell hugging Rine earlier. Now, as far as the actual trap by Icarus Familia goes, it's kind of the same in the light novel, but it's a lot more graphic, of course, because you can be more graphic with the novel than an anime in a TV setting, but this is airing like past midnight in Japan, so I'm not too sure how the ratings work, but if they really wanted to, they could have gone in. But yeah, the siren that Icarus Familia had is basically being used as bait. And when the group does make it into that room, in the light novel, they first encountered a bunch of these deadly hornets because the monsters are being attracted to all the blood on the floor, and they had to deal with those first. And they actually managed to unshackle the siren, and she's like barely alive. And she's like struggling to speak in the light novel, and she finally is able to say, "Run away." And that's of course when Dix and Icarus Familia shows up. And one other thing I thought was strange was that they really made, like, even I was a bit confused. They really drew this siren like it might have been Rei. Like, I thought they could have been a bit more creative with her design, or at least change the colors of the feathers so it didn't look so similar to Rei, because it was very strange. I'm like, that kind of looks like Rei, but I know it's not. But does an anime only, would they think that, what the heck, is that Rei? But yeah, that's not Rei, obviously. And when Icarus Familia shows up, there's actually blood all over their weapons in the light novel. You don't see that showcased in the anime, but of course that blood implies that they were the ones who just got finished torturing the siren. And the way Ordo's death is portrayed kind of bothered me a little bit, because in the light novel, like, of course, Ordo is attacking immediately because it's described that he is the first one to always take action of this group, so it makes sense. But the way they framed it, and they do this a lot for DanMachi in like season 2 and now in season 3, where they have this person just doing this obvious move, like they're really telegraphing something happening, and you question how the person that's being attacked didn't notice it. Like, you have the hunter with the greatsword, like start running from like 20 feet away from Ordo. Like, how do you not notice he's there? Because he's even dragging his greatsword across the ground. Like, how does Ordo not notice this? But what happens in the light novel is that the guy with the greatsword like kind of appears out of Dix's shadow, like immediately behind him. So I thought it was really weird to frame this how they did. And the thing that bothered me was because they didn't really give too much character to Ordo in the anime, like it's kind of hard to care that he died. But in the light novel, like as he's like split in half, he actually looks back to Wine and like tries to extend his hand to her. So it's a lot more tragic in the light novel, but we just have Dix like stepping on his helmet and then Ordo disappears. Because for some reason in the anime, they have every single monster who dies like disintegrate, but that disintegration only happens if you destroy a monster's magic stone core. So it's to me it's always been weird, and it's even weirder here because in the light novel it's so much more graphic where Dix like steps and crushes Ordo's head, and it's described like this blood is just dripping off his boot. So yeah, that happened. But I feel like they've been doing these telegraphed like attacks a lot these past 2 seasons for some reason, because they're not telegraphed in the light novel. Like I mentioned Bell's punch, where he's just kind of standing and charging it, instead of like in the light novel where Leto just gets punched immediately because it's a sneak attack. And then in season 2, where Lena is literally like running straight at Mikoto and then throws the weapon and Mikoto just kind of takes it. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But yeah, it's very strange directing, to me at least. And that's where they end the episode. Again, I think they skipped us 15 pages earlier in volume 10 because they wanted to end this episode on the cliffhanger, and then they're going to go back to those 15 pages in the next episode. But yeah guys, for the most part, I thought the adaptation of at least the community of Xenos in the Hidden Village, and even going into Feld's backstory, was a decent adaptation. I was kind of confused at some of the directing, like I mentioned, and I thought some of the parts that was adapted in volume 10 was a bit odd with how it was handled, but overall this is one of the better episodes, I think. But man, I really wish I could have heard Ray sing and seeing them all dance animated. Like that was something I really wanted to see. And again, the DanMachi mobile game Memoria Freze is doing those small little side stories with each airing of the episode. This week is a small cute chapter with Wine and some of the Xenos like deciding on dividing up into groups, so definitely give that a watch. If you don't have the game, you can download it for iOS and Android, and if you don't want to download the game, just want to see that small event, you can go to Mediocre's channel and I'll link that video in the video description. But anyway guys, I'm curious on what you thought about the episode. I want to know how an anime only feels about this episode. Was some of the directing kind of odd to you? I'm curious on how the light novel readers feel about the adaptation so far. Like I said, it's not going to be the best because we're squeezing all this into 2 episodes, but we're just gonna have to live with what we got and just make the most of it. But hopefully the latter parts of this season are great, because we all know we're all looking forward to those big moments towards the end of the season, especially with volume 11. But again guys, look forward to the cuts and changes video for volume 9, which I am hoping to get done before the next episode, but we'll see. Again, I have a lot of other projects in mind as well, one of them being reading episode Freya and releasing a review and spoiler talk videos about it, because technically this releases on Tuesday, but I got it early because Right Stuff likes to ship their stuff out early for some reason, and I'm happy about that. But also creates more work for me. And if you're curious on like everything DanMachi has to offer, like the light novels, the manga, the mobile game, definitely check out one of my newer videos titled The DanMachi Experience, because I go into like all the different avenues you can go into to experience DanMachi. But anyway guys, go ahead and give this video a like if you liked it, sub to the channel, follow me on Twitter, and join my Discord, and as always, continue enjoying your time adventuring in Mario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.
渦を巻く雨雲から差し込んだまっすぐな強い